Hey, everybody. It's at 4 o'clock. I think we're going to give everybody maybe just one more minute to see who else might join us, and then we'll get started. Perfect. Okay. All right. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Does that seem okay, Betsy?
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely. It's a great turnout.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us and taking time out of your day. And so this will be recorded. So if, for your colleagues that may not have been able to attend, we'll send that out. And Betsy was just saying before we started the meeting today that the recordings have really had some good viewings. So people are going back and watching those and listening to those, which is great. Because as we navigate this process, we're going to need a lot of input from the membership for sure. So I thought what we would do today is I'll just give a brief kind of summary of kind of where things have come from, where things are now. And then I'm going to ask Dr. Kostelik to give a brief summary of what his committee's charge is and kind of what they're working on. And then we'll open the floor and just have open discussion for questions, comments, ideas related to implementation of the two exam process. So as you guys know, the vote was favorable to move forward with the two exam model, and so that is kind of where we are now. And then received a lot of good feedback in person at the Sacramento meeting, and even in a town hall before the Sacramento meeting, and then town halls since then as well. And all of that input is being compiled to use as we move forward. So I just want to encourage you guys that when we have these town halls, it's not really just for the membership to be heard. It's literally to have constructive input for how we move forward and how to implement this in the best way. And so I'll let Dr. Kostelik give a brief introduction of the committee that he chairs, which is called the Exam Process Committee. This was an ad hoc committee that was put together for the purposes of exploring this idea and what it might look like if our organization chose to move that way, and if at some point if we are asked to move this way by the ABVS. So his committee has done a lot of behind the scenes work over the last I believe couple of years, honestly, in just trying to explore every aspect of that and what that might look like. And then they are going to be a key component for how we can best implement this. And obviously, they will be working very closely with the exam committee. There are going to be a lot of moving parts to this, and I know that we all realize that and probably have a good bit of uncertainty related to that. And so we're just trying to shore up some of those things. So, Dr. Kostelik, if you want to take over.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wilburn. Okay, good afternoon and good evening, everybody. So a little bit of background, sort of the impetus for having a two-part exam, evolving training and certification standards, feedback both from the ACT and from the American Board of Veterinary Specialists, poor exam success in 2021. There was a very low pass rate, and we were also on some sort of limited accreditation for a couple of years after that. The goal here was to improve the clarity, the consistency, and the fairness of the examination, and also as an outcome of the job task analysis report, and to make sure that we were examining the right material. So I'm not sure exactly when, but our committee was formed in October of 2023, and prior to that, just over a majority of diplomats supported implementing a two-phase certification. There was some sort of a poll. So our committee was struck in October of 2023. appointed by the ACT Executive Board to define the policies and procedures for implementation of a two-step examination process for veterinarians seeking specialist status by the ACT. I chaired that. My other colleagues were Etta Braidcamp, Julie Cecere, Sarah Eaton, Cynthia O'Connor, Christopher Preman Premandaden. I butchered your name and I apologize. Jack Smith. So we went through the entire gig. We did a little bit of sort of low-level editing and cleaning up, typos and punctuation and that. But our substantive changes were to make two examinations a year, a so-called qualifying examination and then a certifying examination, each given once a year. And they have to be given in that order. So the qualifying exam you do first, and the certifying exam you do second, with a minimum of 1 month. The minimum intervals from registering to writing the qualifying exam and to writing the certifying exam are 6 months and 15 months respectively. Candidates must pass the qualifying exam before they're eligible to write the certifying exam. They can apply to write both examinations in the same year, and there's limits on the number of times that they can write without recertifying. So they have the option of writing the certifying exam fairly early in their program, but they can wait and then do both exams. Write the qualifying exam early in their program, or they can wait and write both exams together. Or if they write the first exam early in the program and are not successful, there's still time then to write it again. And if successful, then they can proceed to the second exam. Both exams are prepared by our exam committee, cover animal species commonly seen by diplomats, and the percentage of each species reflects the current job task analysis. In terms of the exam format, the qualifying exam, the first one, that's only multiple choice. The idea there is to cover core subject matter relevant to theory of genealogy. So kind of background, anatomy, physiology, those kinds of things. The certifying exam will have multiple choice, short answer and essay, and practical questions with pictures or short video clips, focusing on pathology and clinical presentations and require appropriate treatment or management protocols. So in essence, the qualifying exam is more the basic, the sort of fundamental core knowledge. The certifying exam is the more applied, clinically, clinical management kind of knowledge. So that's a quick overview of the changes that we propose to that document. And then there was a discussion about this in California and then the vote there afterwards, and that supported going forward with this. So that's where we're at as a quick overview. I will send this information out, and I'm absolutely always happy to address any questions anyone might have. So back to you, Dr. Wilborn.
Perfect. Thank you for that summary. And so, as we move forward after today, just a quick overview of kind of what that's going to look like. So we intend to have essentially quarterly town hall meetings. So multiple opportunities for people to think of ideas, express those ideas, for us to kind of flesh them out here and see what that might look like as far as implementation. So those would tentatively be in February and May. And then we'll have final kind of discussion in person at the Pittsburgh meeting. After we were, a few of us were meeting yesterday. Dr. Kostelik and I and the Hannah Street team were meeting yesterday in preparation for this. And one of the ideas that we came up with is, after following the discussion that we're going to have today, we thought it might be useful to send out almost like a poll or a survey with some of the points that were, that would be brought up today, and some of the things that have been brought up thus far, and just sort of get more feedback. It won't be like we're voting on anything. It would really just be a polling mechanism to get more feedback, including feedback from people who could not attend today, but have useful things to offer. And so that is our goal, is to send out something probably in the next 7 to 10 days following this meeting, with just some of the ideas that were discussed. What do people think about this? Would this work for your program? Would it not? Just kind of, again, just to get more feedback than the 16 or so people that are on here today. Oh, we're up now. That there's 26 participants. So that's awesome. Okay. All right. At this point, I will just open the floor for discussion. If anybody'd like to kind of lead us off with, and again, it's going to be very casual, but things that you've thought about since we were last all together, or things that you think are going to present the biggest challenge for your trainees or your programs related to this two exam model.
Marco's got a question there.
Yeah, good night, everyone. It's more like a point of clarification about the process. Robin, correct me if I'm wrong. The voting that we conducted, I can't remember, 3, 5, 6 months ago, was about having a one step or two step. So we are now going for the two step. The whole logistics of how it's going to be done is what we are going to start working now, having Dr. Kostelik's groups as a base for the whole time. I'm just want to make sure that that is
Exactly.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and thank you for you summarized that much better than I did. Yes, that is exactly where we are, and Dr. Kostelik's committee has already done some of the fleshing out of ideas and things. So we're not, starting from a blank slate, because they've been putting some of those ideas to the test, within their committee over the last year or so. Like, what if this and what if that, and there are a lot of what ifs, and we are all aware of that. And we became keenly aware of that with the discussion in Sacramento, which was really productive. And just, we're maybe never going to be able to cover all of the what ifs, but our goal is to be prepared, as prepared as possible. So, yes, Marco, that's exactly right.
Just want to jump in here. One of the concerns expressed early on in the process was there were many programs that said, our theory residency is a 2-year program, and we're really firmly committed to keeping it 2 years. And our view is we're completely fine with that. To be completely clear and transparent, there's no push or expectation to change that. If whatever length of program you have, the trainees need a minimum of 2 years, and if you want to run a 2-year program, that's absolutely fine. And there's no absolute, no desire or push to make any changes. Or if you have a 3-year program and you're happy with that, then that's fine too. So those things are not affected. And there were certainly some concerns around that, and I can understand why, but we want to be really clear that that's a non-issue.
Yeah, this is Brian, John, and I agree with that sentiment. I guess what I heard coming out of the meeting in Sacramento too was, again, not that anybody's proposing we change this, maybe I didn't do a very good job following up with this, but some people asked how many other specialty colleges still have a 2-year training program. Are there other specialty colleges that have moved to 3 years? Because one of the things I kept hearing from some of the mentors and some of the program directors was that the timeline was kind of aggressive. They were critical that some of the critique we got from the survey questions was people didn't believe that trainees would be prepared to take the first exam within the first year of the program, which would, in essence, possibly push them back to either taking both exams within a month or two of one another, the way we talked about it before, the second year, or taking that first exam, the qualifying exam, and then taking the third one the third year. So by default, people are pushed to a 3-year program, even though we're not saying it has to be. Does that make sense? It's kind of like I think about even though the legal limit for somatic cell counts are 750,000 for the United States, if most plants are moving to 350, even though 750 is the legal limit, 350 is the functional limit, right? Or 400.
Sure. No, that's a good point. Well, the goal was to reduce this very high stakes exam and create two independent exams. There was also some concerns that from the exam committee that there were some of the candidates that when they wrote the single exam, were doing a good job on the clinical stuff, but were weak on the background, on the fundamental physiology, that kind of thing. So that was the rationale to do that. At this point, we haven't made any firm decisions with regards to the timing of the exam or the exams, and there was some concern expressed by several programs about impinging on the equine breeding season, and we absolutely appreciate that that's a really important consideration. So just in our discussions between Robin and myself, we're just suggesting, putting forward as an idea that, maybe having the qualifying exam in February, maybe like early February, and the certifying exam then in July. And then they have to be a minimum of a month apart, and the qualifying exam has to be earlier in the year than the certifying exam. So again, it's just we're putting it out there as a suggestion. My expectation is that probably the exams will continue to be in a remote format. That's another issue, but we're trying to be as flexible as we can be, and and ultimately we want people to be successful. We want people to be competent, and that's our goal.
And just building on what he was saying is what he just expressed is an example of like what we need to talk about in these forums. For example, that original timeline that was discussed was more of like a an original the sticking with the original exam time of late July and then backing up that first exam based off of that. But the big concern that was voiced in Sacramento, in case some of you were not present then, was that would require that person to be off for several weeks of board prep and study at the end of the equine breeding season, and that they would miss a lot of that clinical time with preparing for the two exams in the event that they decided to take both in one year, or they were unsuccessful the first year and ended up taking both in the second year. So we were trying to internally just throw around some ideas of, well, what would the alternative be? If we're not gonna, if they're not that close together, do we want to stick with the second exam just, in conjunction with the meeting or just prior to the meeting? And it seemed like a lot of people are in favor of that for a lot of reasons. And then, so how could we back that other exam up to where it would still be realistic? And there are a lot of goals to be met. So one of the goals to be met was that person to not be away from clinics for so many weeks, essentially kind of clustered together during the equine breeding season. So could we bump that first exam back to February, for example, to where at least they would be finished with the exam for before most of the breeding season starts, respecting that it starts, earlier than that for some people. But just trying to, we're never going to make everybody completely happy. I think we all know that. And so we're just trying to figure out what would be the best fit. So that's an example of something we threw out and that we will definitely put in the polling that we were talking about sending out in the next week and a half, is really just some ideas. What would this look like if the first exam were in February and the second one were in July? What would that look like for your program? Better or worse, thoughts on that, versus one being in late May and the other one in late July.
I see Leo's got his hand up, and then we've got a question in the chat we can address here in a moment. Leo?
Hey, good evening, everybody. I just have a few comments. The first one is a question for the board as to the process. I understand where we are right now, and we're having this town hall meetings to discuss and do polls and talk a little bit more about alternatives. But what is the end goal? Are you planning to have a gig proposal ready to present to the membership during the next conference to be voted afterwards? And if so, what format will that take, since the membership already voted to move to a two-step certification process? So if you present the Greek proposal and that doesn't pass, then what? Then do we just kick the can down the road another year to do more town hall meetings and come up with another proposal. So I would like to understand a little bit better the thought process behind that. And I just have a few comments regarding this discussion that we're having right now. That we have thought very, very carefully about the logistics of implementing such a process to make sure that we do not stress programs that are 2-year programs. That I think that if you were to restart a conversation that our programs need to move to a 3-year program, to me that's a non-starter. So I think that folks need to understand that, you know, as has been expressed here, that the entire process was designed so that the candidates could still complete their training in a 2-year residency program. The whole calendar of the exam, the only limitation that we have or I should say, the main limitation that we have is self-imposed, because as was expressed here, itself is self-imposed because we need to do the exam at the same time of the conference. So that is a self-imposed restriction. So if they're really out to put all the options on the table, I think that the flexibility on that the exam also need to be considered more carefully. Regarding the idea of pushing the first exam to February, I think that we need to think about that the primary idea is that the candidates will pass that qualifying exam on their first year. So if they have to do 2 exams in 1 year is a boo-boo because they didn't pass the first time. So if you move the exam all the way to January, February, it means that those candidates will have 6-7 months in their program before they're writing their first exam. So I don't think that that helps them very much. Need to think a little bit about that as well. So the idea is that they will write their first exam at the end of their first year and write their second exam at the end of the second year. So if they have to write the 2 exams in 1 year, that's because they didn't pass the first attempt. We need to be careful about moving that date of the qualifying exam too close to the date of when candidates would be starting their programs, because otherwise then you I guess minimizing the chances of the candidates that are writing the exam on their first year to pass because they didn't have much time in their programs yet. So few comments, and I would like to hear from the executive board what exactly is the plan to when it comes down to a vote. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm listening to you and taking notes and then trying to look at the chat really quick too. People are putting some oh, go ahead. Was somebody about to?
I can't find the react button. My question alongside of what Dr. Brito said is, do they have to take the first part in their first year? Because to me, they only have 6 or 7 months between the start of their program and that first part if they're allowed to take it the first year of their program. If we're asking them to take both parts in the second year of a 2-year program, or the first part in the second year of a 3rd-year program and the second part in a third, then technically they could have actually a year and 6 months before they take the first part. So I think part of this decision and timing is who actually gets to sit that first exam, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so just to revisit what Dr. Klabnik was saying, and Dr. Brito's comments as well, the original thought with the timing of the first versus the second exam was exactly what Leo was saying, is that original thought process was to allow for people in a 2-year residency to be able to do that. Because as he mentioned, if you have a 2-year program, and we are asking them to take that to push that first exam back to February, then they are literally only in that program for 7, 8 months at most before they're having to take that first exam, and that's not ideal. I think we all agree that's not ideal and not enough time to get used to the residency and also prepare for a major exam. So that's a big trade-off there. And so the only reason that we were throwing around that idea was the concern about that a lot of people had, which is legitimate, about the equine breeding season. So, and here again, to go back to what Leo was saying is, we do have this self-imposed restriction if we decide to keep that second exam in July in conjunction with the conference. And we don't have to do that. If as a membership, if we decide that this would be a better fit some other way, we can certainly explore that. I mean, that's not part of our intention, but if that's what we need to do to create the best fit, then that's what, that's what we would do. Some of the things that were voiced in support of keeping the exam in conjunction with the conference was the idea of candidates, being together when they found out those results, and having some camaraderie and sense of community there with the timing of that exam. But if we decide that that's a trade-off we want to make, these are definitely some of the things that will be in the polling document that we're going to send out. Let me see. I took some notes when Dr. Brito was talking. Are we going to vote on another gig change in Pittsburgh? And so, as we figure out how this might best be implemented, then we will need to determine, okay, is that the language that we're going to put into the gig? And so that would be the final discussion or kind of final decision making, final step in the decision making process, which ideally would be around the time of the Pittsburgh meeting, unless there is something that preventing us from making those decisions. So we don't want to kick the can down the road, as he mentioned. We don't want to do that. We want to figure out how to go ahead and move forward, but we don't want to make a misstep in doing that and overlook something really important. So if it seems like things are kind of going slowly, that's the reason, is just to make sure that we have as many things covered as possible, as many of the what ifs as possible. Let's see, Dr. Brito, were those your, I think those were your questions or points.
No, yes. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry if I sounded like I that we don't need to listen to all the concerns. My concern was, if there is one proposal and it's put up for a yes or no vote, and that is voted no, then it's back to the drawing board. So that is thinking just about very very nitty gritty logistical details, I guess. I don't know what the solution is, but perhaps there could be different, at least a couple versions of what the proposals of the different things that end up being discussed. So whatever the result of that vote is, it means that we're moving towards a gig that describes the two exams as the certification process.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying now, and that's a great point. So we're not, and I appreciate you bringing that up. So, whatever, once we kind of develop some of the more finalized language, I think what you're saying is it doesn't need to be a yes, no, do we agree with this language? Maybe it would be like do we favor this version of the implementation or this version of the implementation? Is that what you were kind of getting at? Because that's a really good point. Uh-oh, we can't hear you.
No, I'm just thinking about it because we usually what is done is the gig is presented for a vote, right? If you just present one version of this is the version that we would go to a two-step certification process, and that gig is voted down, that means that we still are yet another year behind implementation.
Yeah, that's a great point. And
So,
I think we definitely have to vote on these substantive changes to the gig for sure, but I don't know that it has to be in the way that we've done it in the past. Like you said, like here are the suggested edits. We agree or don't agree with this. I think we could have essentially just a brief description of what, the implementation would look like, and maybe give people the option to choose between a couple of different implementation processes,
So,
and then that part be added instead of voting on the actual document.
okay, I see. Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. That sounds great.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't know if you've been able to keep up with with some of the comments in the chat, but one of
No,
them,
actually, I was just going to say, would you be willing to summarize what's in the chat? And navigating this from my phone, I don't want to
it's okay.
I don't want to upset the apple cart.
So Dr. Trundle has brought up a couple of good points. I think he brought up the first point as well. He asked about if the exam committee going to write the exam, 2 exams per year once this goes into place, and how will it be handled with respect to when people don't pass the exam with the questions. And my thoughts, I don't serve in the exam committee anymore, but I suspect the same rules that we apply now with every year will be a different exam. And the same rules that apply about recycling questions will apply. It doesn't matter if it's a one or two exam. So I think that's pretty straightforward. Nothing will change there. The other comment was a little more interesting, and I think Dr. Trindle and I talked about this at the Sacramento meeting. His question was the transition years. It has to be decided if candidates can choose one exam format or two, and once they're under the gig, they stay that way to avoid candidates falling under different gigs. So just to explain what that would mean, um, if this is a gig rule, there's going to be a period of a few years where we may be administering a single exam to trainees and candidates for some time, and there would be this slow turnover of people going to a 2 exam process, right? And one thing that I don't know if this is even allowed, but I think it was Dr. Trundle and I talked that whenever a new testing modality is implemented in schools, you start implementing that best practice right away. And I'm not trying to say this is what happens, but I'm not sure. I don't know if if all the candidates get moved to a 2 exam or if they get phased in over several years. And that might cause a lot of feather ruffling, but it's something we certainly have to talk about.
Yeah, that's a great
I,
point. So,
I
oh,
think that
sorry.
it's all based on which gig they register under, right?
Yeah.
If they register
Yes.
a gig that just says one exam, we cannot make them write 2 exams.
But then
Yeah.
Leo, Dr. Trundle's point was, if we believe we're making this change because it's best practice, can a person choose to be under a 2 exam if they want to, and us allow them to be on a 2 exam if they think that's better, or do we force them to stay on a 1 exam? And so that was one of Dr. Trundle's points at the Sacramento meeting.
Yes, that's a great point. So one of the things that we were in trying to flesh that out, one of the things that we had outlined was, okay, to Leo's point, they would be bound under the gig that they essentially sign on to, right, at the time they register. But then once this is implemented, we could give them the option to choose the 2 exam model after they've already, registered. But I think it would be an option. It would not be that we're requiring them to revert to something that they essentially didn't agree to, if that makes sense. I don't see a downside to allowing them to choose that if that's what they want, but they would not be required to do so. And you bring up a good point too about the exam committee. And if some of you on here are on the exam committee, thank you for that. And this is obviously going to impact them in a big way. And so a lot of the, ideas that we come up with may or may not be feasible with regard to what is realistic for the exam committee. So that's going to be a big thing to consider as well.
I just wanted to point out very quickly that the blueprints for the exams will be very different. So if you have the blueprint for somebody that's just writing one exam, that's a very different blueprint from somebody who is writing 2 exams. So I really don't see how this could work. I am I think I would put some money on it to say that nobody's gonna want to write an extra exam. but yeah, I don't think that is something that can be done because, like I said, the blueprints of the exams are completely different.
I guess maybe I'm naive, Leo, but I don't know how they're that different. It's the same material from the job task analysis. It's just one would be the basic physiology and the other one's clinical based.
No,
And so
no,
it's
but the percentage of the different competencies are all different, Brian.
so
The composition of the exam when the exam committee puts out this is how we structure our exam. So the percentages for you know a normal reproductive physiology, the female needs to match 10%.
yeah.
So that is the blueprint of those exams. If one is doing just one exam, it's very different from somebody who is doing the two exams.
I guess respectfully, I would think cumulatively, when you add the two together, they're going to be the same. The two exams should equal the same material in the job task analysis of one total exam. So I guess you'll have to write it on a whiteboard for me to help me understand that, Leo, because I'm kind of lost. But maybe that's beyond the time we have to talk in the town hall.
Yeah, so I would encourage everybody, if you guys are interested in looking more into that, in the our web page, if you go to the one of our pages, you're gonna see the job task analysis, and that document has a specific breakdown of the blueprint for one exam versus if there were to be two exams. So then there is a blueprint specific for the first exam and a blueprint specific for the second exam. So that's what I say. The percentages of course, it's out here. It's all the same. It's all the same material, but the percentage for the different competences are different.
And maybe this will help. I don't know because I'm following what you guys are saying, but one of the options that was proposed was to let that person, that person could have the choice if they wanted to do the two exam model or the one exam model. If depending on what time they register, right? And there are obviously going to be some challenges in the transition years for sure, and that will be asking more of the exam committee and all of us honestly and the TCC, everyone to try to navigate that. But I think the timelines that we voted on, when we voted a few months ago, I know most of us were focused on this vote, which was important. But the other thing that we voted on was some change in the language, which limits their timeline once they register to take the exam. And so that will help to limit the transition period with people that are signed on to the one exam gig versus the two exam gig. So the transition years will be a little bit rough, but hopefully that will be essentially a 3-year span of time and not the next 8 or 10 years where people are lingering in the exam pool.
I just wanted to jump in and make a little comment about, I mean, I was fairly vocal at the business meeting in Sacramento about the years and the impingement on like a lot of activities. I think the thing that I wanted to emphasize about the timing of the exam to have one in February and one in June was to emphasize that both exams should be employed to second-year residents, not to a first and a second-year resident. So I think that was maybe a little bit of a misunderstanding. I don't think anyone wants their residents sitting a board exam within 6 months of them starting their residency, but to have an 18-month and a 2-year time point, which would seem fair. The other point of that, and so this is my question, is what is then the credentialing committee impact of having 2 exams? Will candidates need to credential twice or once? And when will that happen? Because that would seem to be another sort of like bottleneck here of, how do we administer, because it will be a 2 credentialing committee efforts potentially instead of 1.
I
Yeah,
think
that's a great point.
I
Oh,
think
so
that
go ahead.
our original proposal was that candidates did not need to credential to write the qualifying exam. They're registered, and of course they register their program. They submit all the necessary material to register for their program, so they wouldn't go through what we called a full credentialing process to write the qualifying exam. So, and then after they qualify, then they would submit their uh, package for credentialing when they wanted to sit the actual certification process. So that was something that was planned to kind of address a little bit of the logistical challenge that would be to credential everybody. And so we have with yet the safeguard, of course, they are registered in the residency program. They are veterinarians. They fulfill all the requirements to register, and then they will still have to go through a credentialing process at the end when they're ready to actually write their certification exam.
Yes. And related to that, one of the things that came up in preliminary discussions was what Leo said, that essentially there's no vetting process for that first exam as long as they are enrolled in an approved program. But the second part to that was, would we want them to pay part of that exam fee when they take the first exam, or would that just all be paid when they take the second exam, or would that be sort of split in between those? And that has not been fleshed out yet, so that is definitely up for discussion as well. The one of the things that was brought up was that when they, at least for ours, I can speak for our program as an example because we have a 3-year traditional university residency. But when they sign on to register in their program, that's $300 out of pocket for them. And so just having them be prepared for those costs of the exam, and would that be spread out, or would that be all in one lump sum when they take the second exam? Those are definitely some things that we're going to need some feedback about what that would look like in, what that would look like in our program may not be what that would look like in a 2-year program. And in preliminary discussion of, well, what if we move that first exam back to February? And it's already kind of been stated here, but if we have people starting in July and then they were trying to take that first exam 6 or 8 months later and also having to pay a fee, that's a lot of money out of pocket in a very short period of time for them. But I think we all agree that taking that first exam after 6 or 8 months of residency is not a good idea anyway.
Yeah, there's a comment in the chat. It would make sense that people need to pay something for the first exam. Otherwise, what happens is someone takes the first exam and then decides not to take the second exam for whatever reason. So yeah, and I think that's valid. And that first exam would be multiple choice only, so that would be machine graded. It's going to take time and effort from the exam committee to prepare it, of course, but it'll be a smaller task than the certifying exam, and so we could probably presumably have a lower price for that.
Yeah, David also wrote that, and I think this is a good idea, pay all up front and before the first exam, so then they're kind of invested for the whole time. So they have more reason to follow through because they've already paid.
And just for perspective, I believe that amount is $550. Does that sound right, Betsy or Maureen?
It's currently $750.
Oh, I'm sorry, $750. Yep. In some preliminary discussions, we were talking about having them pay $200 and then the remainder, and that's where my brain saw $550. So the total right now for the exam is $750, and then they're paying $300 when they register in their training program at the very beginning. And for what it's worth, at least at our university, the university will not allow them to use travel funds or anything else for those fees. And so for our trainees, those fees are all out of pocket.
I just wanted to point out that it's administering an exam, even remotely, is not without cost to us,
Oh, sure.
the college. So we have at least, I would say, at least a break even on that.
Yeah. Because by the time, yeah, we have, yeah, for sure.
I'm making some notes, and as far as things that we want to put in the polling document that's going to come out in the next 7 to 10 days, and this will be, I think this is a great thing to put in that polling document.
Hey, Dr. Kalapnik, can you explain your last comment? So I'm not sure. I'm trying to understand it in the chat.
Yeah.
I think I
So
know what you're saying, but I just want to make sure you say it because I don't want to say it wrong.
no, that's okay. And it's hard to explain the thought that's in my head, which is why I tried text, but here we go. So if part of the concern is these transition years where we'll have a bunch of people taking the 2 year and a bunch of people taking the 2 year, the 2 model, and a bunch of people taking the 1 year model, couldn't we start next year's gig that says, we'll just use a very far down the line, in 2040, we're going to use a 2 exam model, and everybody starting the gig now will only take 1 model exams until that year, and then everybody after that point is going to take this 2 model. And so we have a cohort that are under a gig that literally says if you want to take it before, it's going to be a 1, and if you want to take it after, it'll be a 2, so that there's going to be less people. It would be the people in this year's gig or past that would be allowed to, take a 1 exam after this transition date. And I get that goes against the best practices of, if we think this is best practice, starting it sooner, but it may make transitioning a little bit easier and less work on the exam committees. Does that?
Well, yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. Rather than saying what gig you're under, let people know well in advance. And that I think we'd have to. You're making my brain hurt, but I think I know what you're saying. That you don't have you have a hard start, but you let people know in advance that at this time, all exams will be 2 exam, qualifying and certifying, and anything before that is just the single exam.
Yeah. And then once you hit that date, the whole gig could convert to, we only offer this 2 year, 2 model exam, as just a thought to maybe make the transition smoother for the committee, because they won't have to start that 2 year until most of the eligible candidates have surpassed their time to take the exam, or they have taken it and hopefully passed.
One of the things that was thrown out was, if we're going to have final discussion and voting on the verbiage for the gig in Pittsburgh, then we wouldn't be implementing it by the time the next group of trainees signs on, assuming most of them are doing that mid-July in most programs, not all, but most. And so if the voting occurred and we implemented, after that next group had signed on, then maybe the implementation date could look something like mid-October. I mean, provided we have discussion, vote, some form of implementation passes, and then that if the implementation date, if we chose an arbitrary date of say mid-October, it would allow for people to start their program and have that 90-day, they have a 90-day window to register once they start their program. Essentially, they would be signing on still under that 1 exam model at that point. And then we could choose the implementation date, which again would have to be after July, just based on when the meeting is. And so if we did that, then it would impact the people signing on to the gig for the following July. So that would be 2027, right?
So, I think that Dr. Klapnik's proposal, there may be some aspects that are very good to the college, I think. For example, the fact that the transition won't exist, right? So it's either going to be 1 exam for 3, what is the shot clock? It's 3 years, right?
3 years.
Yeah, so starting next July for the next 3 years, it's one exam only. The fourth year onwards is going to be two exams. So there's no transition, right? We'll continue things as go. The other benefit to it is that it allows us to perfect the model of having two exams because we're gonna have basically 3 years to have the logistics and everything perfected by the time that we need to implement it. And the other thing is that you remove the need for a candidate to petition for, oh, I was on a one exam gig, now I want to petition for a two exam and have that option. So I see some of those as the benefits. Of course, the con would be, it may look like we're kicking the can down the road, like Leo said, but I think we just should consider that carefully.
That certainly would take some pressure off the exam committee. And that's not, and for those of us that have served in there know how challenging that is. Just in the when I did it, which is a number of years ago, it was challenging, and then it's probably gotten more complex, and then especially with the GTA issues and all of that, and then if you then layer on to that having to write, three exams, yeah, maybe having a uniform start at this year, whatever that is, then that's when it starts. Yeah, and it avoids that overlap. It delays things, but it does it keeps the exam committee, it avoids those transition overlap years, and the exam committee is going to be really stretched thin to put all this together. That's a good point.
Or I don't know, and I'm just thinking out loud because my brain's trying to wrap around what you guys are saying, but because we are going to have, a hard and fast implementation date, whatever that is, and then people signing on after that. Like, are we talking about lingering with the one exam model for an additional, for example, 3 years? But those people, we're going to have people signing on to the gig registering every year. And so, like, I guess I'm unsure about what would happen to those people that were registering during, what contract are they signing on under during the transition time?
This is just, I'm just talking off the top of my head here, so bear with me. My expectation is as we revise the gig, we could write that into it. We can say, okay, we are moving to a two exam model in, the year 2029 or 2030 or whatever that is. And until that date, we will have a one exam model, and then thereafter we'll have a two exam model. And it would have to be late enough that anybody who originally registered under the one exam model, that they've essentially timed out. And the people that signed on, let's say in 2027 or 2028 or whatever that is, prior to this firm start, would be aware that this is coming at this year, sort of thing. So
Okay, thank you. I think I was not being open-minded enough, so I think I'm understanding now. So you're saying actually put those
gig,
dates into the gig so that
yeah,
when they sign on
yeah,
to their
yeah.
gig, they
So
will know which one they are bound under,
full,
based on whatever year they take the exam.
exactly, absolute
Okay.
full transparency. So even though we're moving towards that model, we can indicate, at what time that will begin, and so it's a one exam model up until that time, and thereafter it's a two exam, and then nope, and then, but it would have to be late enough. It has to be late enough that anybody who signed up under the one exam model, that they've effectively run out of time, that their shot clock has expired, and then the gig has, so my that's a I hadn't thought in those terms, but it certainly does make the exam preparation easier because it avoids this overlap where the exam committee literally has to prepare three exams.
I guess
Yeah, John.
the what if I'm thinking about is those people that were unsuccessful in their in their first attempt, and then the year changes, and now they have to take, both exams. But I guess that
That
would just be
that
the way it
that
was.
we're just following the gig that they sign on that stated that until 2029, whatever, was one exam, and after that was two exams. So if they fail to pass until we made the change, they knew that from the time they sign on the document. So I think that's the
That's the issue. Then it's full transparency, and when they
The,
sign up,
the only caveat here is that we're talking about candidates that sign off under a different gig, not the
Yes.
one that you're mentioning that
Yes,
it would
that's
be.
what I was thinking too. Because I
well,
do appreciate that whatever they sign on under is almost like a contract, and I think that's a win-win. For both parties, they have clear understanding, and yeah.
so to circumvent that problem, like John said, the implementation of the 2-year exam has to be for not earlier than whatever many years the shot clock expires. So
right?
if you're saying we're going to put this in the gig for next year and the shot clock's 3 years, the implementation will be 3 years from next year's gig.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
You have to look at the logistics of it, but I would think that would be the only kind of fair and transparent. If someone signed up under a particular gig, then I think we have no option but to honor that, and anything else would be just, well, it's probably just unacceptable. So it's not even an issue.
But we could still honor that with the language that's been kind of proposed here, right? With saying that, because the ones that are in the system would, theirs would be honored, and then we would say, as of this date, which would be 3 years from then, this is when it will change. So I think we are still honoring that, right? I mean, if
Well,
I'm thinking about it.
we'll have to go back to the current gig and just see what that shot clock is, and because I simply don't remember, but I know clearly it's probably I'm imagining that it's there, and we need to verify what's there.
Yeah, I'll make a note of that, and maybe somebody remembers, because I can't remember if it's 3 years from the time I think it's 3 years from their first attempt at the exam.
I'm
Does that
looking at
sound
it
right?
right now, and it says after successful credentialing, trainees have 5 years of eligibility and may retake the certifying exam up to 3 times without petitioning.
So
Oh, thank you. 3
Yeah.
times over the course of 5
And
years.
I'll paste that in the
Okay.
chat.
Yes, thank you.
So we also have so many years from registration that they have to credential. So they have so many years they have to, and I have to go back and look at the exact date, but they have to credential within a certain number of years following registering. So they have so much time after they credential, and they have so much time after they register. Or I got those backwards.
I think I know what you mean. You mean from the time they start their training program, there is a clock now that says that they have to essentially
Credential.
apply to sit the exam within a limited time frame.
They have to credential within a certain limit, and then if they don't do that, they have to go back to the and register again. So we created 2 shot clocks, one for registration to credentialing. You need to credential within a certain time from the time you register, because we had lots of people, we had some people that were staying in a registered program but never credentialing. Yeah, there it is. Failure to petition for the candidacy within 5 years. Yes. So they have 5 years to do that, and then they have 5 years to, as Dr. Klapnick posted, that they're eligible to take the exam, but they still have the number of limits, the number of times they can take the exam.
And I also would add that this is the reason why we had such a tough transition time with moving from multiple species to one species. Was exactly that. All the folks are just lingering in the system, that they're not even writing the exam. It's not that they're failing the exam. They're not even, but they have registered their program way back, and then we still have to honor the gig that they register under. So I think the shot clocks will put an end to that. So we would make the transition if it was done the same way. It would make the transitions a little bit easier than it has been for the migrating from the multiple species to the single species, but yeah, it would make it a little bit easier. But because that is the main reason why that was cumbersome was all those folks that are still lingering in the system. That is it. Next year, we're going to have to put together one exam for one candidate to write a species-specific exam. Just to give you guys an example of that. So I think that with the gig that it has been approved, that'll put an end to that.
I do want to acknowledge with my proposal of an implementation date that if we decide the candidates take their first exam at the end of their first year, we do need a transition year in there because otherwise there would be a gap year in which certifying exams would happen. So I don't think that's a reason to pick when we give the first exam, but it is something to acknowledge that there still would be a transition year as well.
Yeah, I guess all of this, I gotta sit down and pencil all this out because there's still a lag. And I guess what you're saying, Dr. Klapnick, is we write it in there where we say that beyond this time, we no longer offer a single exam. But if that person signed up on a gig that allowed for two exams, I really don't see, unless we create new gigs, I don't see how we do away with this, in essence, 10 years and these 3 opportunities to take an exam, a single exam. I mean, that's a 10-year lag, right? From the time someone registers a program, it literally could be out to about 10 years if they have 5 years between registering and certifying, and then they have another 5 years between
Right.
petitioning or credentialing and taking the exam. There's still a lot of time where we have to write a single exam for people. I'm still struggling knowing how we're going to eliminate that lag. Maybe I just don't have the imagination.
Well, maybe that lag is 5 years or 7 years instead of 10 years, though.
Yeah, I feel like with the things that have been thrown out just now, I feel like there is always going to be some, like you said, lag, and but I think what you guys are describing would limit that as much as as much as humanly possible. And I do like that idea, and I do like the idea of giving the exam committee a little more buffer time. Um, I really appreciate what's been discussed so far, and I think that will be beneficial.
I mean, the other option, as we talked about earlier, was the potential of giving people an option, even if they signed up under a one exam gig, giving them the option of going to a two exam, and if they chose that, then they could, then that would be like an off ramp, and it would reduce the probability that we'd have to create that single exam. But again, we could have the situation like we've got coming up where we've got one individual that is asking for a specific exam, and we have to honor that.
Yeah, you guys help me think through this. I feel like my brain shuts down sometimes this time of day, but if we did not do that, the thing that's been discussed now with like the hard and fast, here's the time we're going to transition. If we allowed, if we said, okay, everyone's signing on with the next gig after we approve this would fall under the two exam, and then we let other people opt in if they wanted, would that decrease the overall transition period? I guess that's my question, because I liked the idea initially of just having that hard and fast after, 2020, 29, whatever, we'll go to two exams. But then I wonder if the transition period wouldn't be shorter um, if we did it the other way, where we just allow them to be honored under that gig and go ahead and essentially change the gig.
Well, there's stuff coming up in the chat. I think my quick understanding is that we're mandated for 10 years with those. They got that 5 years to credential, and then another 5 years to complete their exam. So if we were to have that hard start, we'd be pushing things back, up approximately 10 years or perhaps a little bit more because we have to introduce the new gig and all of that. So, and that probably becomes simply too long.
Yeah, and if I could make a comment about that, I think we're preparing for the minority of people. Most of the people that go through this are not going to need that full 10 years. So, but we need to plan for the worst. So I guess there is going to be additional work for the exam committee for some time. But what we discussed before was that it's really the same questions. We just they do have to make exams. But John, I know you know this, and I know this, and others on this call know we have made 6 exams in the past. And so I don't think we've gone to one multi-species exam. So we keep talking about we don't make it too hard for the exam committee. Well, we've already made it much easier by having a single, other than the exception Leo mentioned, we've already eliminated making a lot of other exams. So to make a multi-choice exam for qualifying and to have a certifying exam and then having still a single exam, that's 3 exams. We used to make like 6, I think, maybe I'll have to think about it a second. And so I don't know that it's that much, but yeah, I'm really struggling with following the argument that we eliminate this because there's going to be people that are going to be lingering in this system for a long time.
So can I just, for example, if let's say we pick 2030 to start, right, knowing that there's people that have up to 10 years, and we say that candidates that have been on previous gigs and are 5 years out from the credentialing, that means they finished their residency program already, and they probably took the exam maybe once or twice and did not pass. Those are qualified to petition to switch to a 2 exam starting whatever when the petition is approved. I don't know if that's something that can be entertained or not, with the idea of taking those 1 exam and converting them on their will to a 2 exam and reducing the need to do the single exam.
This is not easy for sure. I appreciate everybody's input. I was just looking at the clock and thinking that maybe we should take another, 5 minutes or so and then just kind of wrap up for now, knowing that this is not the final discussion, right? This is just productive discussion, and then we'll summarize this. But does anyone have any additional input on this topic or any other aspect of implementation? I certainly don't want to cut our time short, but I just want to respect everybody's time.
This doesn't have to be answered right now because the answer maybe can be, maybe we can make it what it needs to be. But for the exam committee, it was previously that all the exams that were put together were done at the same retreat. Since these exams would be at 2 different times, would that mean that the exam committee would then be basically putting in the same amount of effort, but 2 different times of the year to make 2 exams? Because that could impact whether people sign up to be on the exam committee, especially those that have a heavier workload in the spring as compared to, say, the summer or fall of the year.
Good point.
I don't envision that would be the case, but I have not served on the exam committee, and I appreciate that some of you on here have, but I don't foresee that. Do any of you that have served on the exam committee foresee that it would require like a second retreat time?
I would say no. I mean, I think the workload is the same. It's just when the exam's ultimately given. So I would say no.
Yeah, and especially if the qualifying exam is a multiple choice exam, like was mentioned earlier, the system grades it. There may be a little bit of work by the chair, maybe the coach or the vice chair, the person that's coming up, but it seems like they could still write the exam at a similar time. They just know they're writing the exams later on.
Because are the 2, yeah, because I was thinking not so much for those specific members that have more tasks to do after the exam. But yeah, so during making it. So are the two exams, are they the same size? I feel like I heard this discussed previously, but I can't remember. I don't know if I heard anything. Are they the same? So are both exams going to be the equivalent size of the one exam right now? Or is it basically taking the one exam and splitting it as percentage? So not in half, but like as the percentages are doled out?
It's the qualifying with the two exam model, the qualifying exam is going to be 1 day, and the other one, I can't remember, but I'm thinking it might be more than a day. I think so. Collectively, it's going to be longer.
It would go up.
That would be my expectation.
I think for the we haven't got into the real details about the exams, but the details that we kind of somewhat firm on is what John just described, that the qualifying exam would be 1 day, and there will be just multiple choice questions. So for what perhaps Jack and Briar were trying to touch on was the time that the exam committee spends preparing the exam, which I think that, as Brian said, the committee has prepared 6 exams before. I've been there, and I know it's a lot of work, but I know that the exam committee can put together and get it done. So the time that the retreat time, when you go into a room with everybody and you looking at the language specific questions and you pulling and tearing things apart, I don't think that time will increase because all the 3 exams would be, at least in my mind, would be prepared at the same time. And since the qualified exam is only multiple choice questions, as Brian said, that is Robert Balanovsky and the exam chair working on pulling the results together. That's it.
Yeah, and I think I wrote it in the chat if people haven't seen it. I think we can give the exam committee what we believe we want with respect to, basic questions, physiology questions, more clinical based disease questions. But ultimately, they're the ones that decide, because that's really that's what they're supposed to do for us. And so they'll be the ones that will help us know if it needs to be a 1 or 2 exact day or 1.5 day. And so we can make some assumptions that one's a 1 day and one's a 1.5 or 2 days, but I think it's just speculation right now.
And we haven't really talked about this yet, and this is probably an exam committee question too, but, would the Angoff scoring committee also score this exam? I mean, I would think they would, the way that they do the major exam, but that might, take some time as well.
In terms of, we can look at the historical record from how when people have registered in the program, when they've credentialed, and when they've written the exam. We could look back and get some, and it's not a guarantee what happens going forward, but I mean, we talk about theoretically someone could take 10 years, that could take 5 years to credential, another 5 years to write. In theory, they have that time. I guess my question is, does anybody actually delay that long? And so we could get some kind of a notion as to, at least based historically, and it doesn't guarantee what happens going forward, but it give you an idea as to how likely that is, and that could be some useful information then when we try and sort out when we're going to implement these changes.
Yeah, that is a good point. And I'm thinking about what Brian was saying earlier, that's probably a very small percentage of people that we're kind of preparing for that worst case, but I don't have a number to put on that.
And again, not to continue to talk about this one topic, but the exam committee still has to prepare the exam, even if it's only for one candidate. And so it's still, and the grading on these automatic systems isn't that big a deal, but the grading on the short answers and essays, those rubrics, those are not insignificant, the time it takes to grade those. So, but I will say if it's only for one candidate or one trainee and they're taking a single exam, um, yeah, that's a little easier than having, 20 candidates and you have to grade all those essays.
Yeah.
So it is a little easier with a single.
The work to prepare it is the same if it's 1 or 100, but the grading, if it's a short answer, like if it's a hand graded, then the grading is a function of the number of the candidates, of course.
Was there anything else we've missed in the chat or that I've missed in the chat for those of you on a full computer?
There's a question here, Dr. Seidlinger. I was late to join the meeting, so I may have missed it, or I may have missed this along the way, but I was wondering, what is the goal mission of transitioning to the 2-exam model? Want
I guess, Dr. Seidlinger, when you ask what the goal or mission of moving to the 2-exam, can you explain what you mean by that? Why did we transition to that, or why was it proposed? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, so I guess that's a longer story. It was proposed because some of the membership voted that they were interested in that a few years ago, and then we talked about that at some of the business meetings, that there was some concern. Dr. Kostelik voiced it earlier. There was some concern that some of the candidates were struggling with the basic physiology and some of the basic material on the exams, and by dividing it, they can what's the old adage? The way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And so by splitting the exam into 2s, we would hopefully increase the success of those. Now, this last year, we had a very successful pool, but some of this discussion came out of the year that we had not a great exam success rate. And so a lot of these discussions started then. But we've made more than one change. So it's like a lot of things, right? When there's a problem, we made multiple changes, and this is one that's been discussed for a few years now.
Hey, Brian, and also Dr. Seidlinger, just to clarify, the point of are we staying with 1 or 2 exams, that has been already voted and decided by the membership that we are going to go to a 2-exam model. So the goal now from here on is to really focus on the process of how to transition from 1 to 2, considering all the issues with gigs and timelines and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I just saw the comment that she made about was the goal to split the material, and I guess yes and no. The goal, I think, was to help candidates better prepare, and maybe have a benchmark of how prepared they might already be on the the baseline physiology and certain aspects before they move on to the clinical aspects. So not necessarily to divide it for the sake of dividing it, but just to give them more of a benchmark of their foundational knowledge. But that's just my paraphrasing of it. These guys have already kind of done a good job of expressing the history. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. I think we'll wrap up for now, and then if you think of things prior to the next town hall, if you would email those to the Hannah Street email, it was at the bottom of the town hall registration, and then they will continue to compile all of this so that we have it all in one place. But I certainly just super appreciate everybody's time and thought and dedication to making this a smooth transition. And again, the recording will be sent out. So tell your colleagues if they couldn't attend, that the recording will be sent out. And then we'll also do some type of follow-up polling in the next 7 to 10 days. And again, it's not a vote. It's just to provide any additional thoughts or feedback on some of the things we've talked about.
I just want to add, I think with regards to the polling, and I'm kind of putting words into Dr. Wilborn's mouth, and she can redirect if she wants. But it seems to me that one of the ideas with the polling is to try to refine and improve the ideas so that when we do get to a formal vote, we have a better sense of what's likely to be supported, and trying to formulate the most desirable options.
That's exactly right. And I apologize, I've turned my camera off because it's dark where I am, but I'm fully present still. But yes, that's exactly right, because the 15 or 20, or tonight almost 24 people that are on here, our membership is much bigger than that. And so like Dr. Kostelik said, trying to have some idea of feedback from the greater portion of the membership, and whether these things would be supported once they come to a vote, because we do want to develop a successful plan that is essentially passed in Pittsburgh, but we need all the input to do that. I was just reading some of the things in the chat. Yeah. All right. So thanks to everybody. Oh, and Maureen put that email address in the chat too, info@theoryofgenealogy.org. So just keep that in mind. You can drop things there anytime, and they will compile them into this central document. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time.
One quick question before we sign off. Is it possible, I know this is recorded, is it reasonable to get an AI generated script from this so that folks can
We
just make-
will, yes. Yep.
that'd be very helpful, because my impression is that the AI generated scripts from Zoom are reasonably functional. Yeah, that's my experience has been quite positive. So
Yeah.
wonderful.